Good day, everyone. It is highly recommended, before we start, for me to say this, it's highly recommended that you attend this event from your computers instead of your mobile devices. If you would like to listen to this event in Chinese, in Japanese, or in Korean, please follow the link and instructions which my colleagues have posted in the chat and displayed on the screen for simultaneous translation that will be provided throughout the session. A very warm welcome to the third installment of the Asia Pacific Online Policy Forum by Kaspersky, where we gather leaders and experts across the public and private sectors to discuss pressing issues on cybersecurity. Kaspersky is the world's largest privately held cybersecurity company, and we protect over 400 million users and about 250,000 corporate clients around the globe. Today, we operate in nearly 200 territories, and our comprehensive security portfolio includes not just leading endpoint protection, but also a number of specialized security solutions and services to fight sophisticated and evolving digital threats. As countries undergo rapid digital transformation amidst this new normal, cybersecurity has been at the forefront of everyone's minds. The question of capacity, of course, follows closely, because a country's cyber resilience is only as strong as its resources, its expertise, knowledge, and citizens' maturity in this area. Given the unprecedented rate of digital transformation, many today are playing catch-up. And this is, of course, not solely a national problem, because well, the interconnectedness of the online space means that there is a potential for a cyber incident in one location to have regional or even global implications. Therefore, it is important to collectively boost our cyber capacities for a safer cyberspace. Now, with that problem statement defined, we now know the what. And today, at today's online policy forum, we will try to unpack the how. So what are the real needs and goals of countries in cyber capacity building, education, and awareness? Once again, warm welcome to our third Asia Pacific Online Policy Forum titled Greater Resilience Through Cyber Capacity Building. We have more than 1,500 people who have registered for today's forum, and I am excited to be your moderator. My name is Jeannie Gan, Head of Public Affairs for Asia Pacific at Kaspersky. During today's session, we will discuss and learn more from the success stories we can glean from our expert panel representing different sectors, different countries, different communities today. Some housekeeping. Feel free to pose your question to any of our speakers during the webinar. You may have noticed that all participants are muted from the start. You can, however, type your questions into the question and answer box and click send. It'll be helpful if you can indicate who the question is directed at. And please do not forget to provide your name as well, because we want to know who's asking the question. The questions will be in a queue for publishing. We will try to feature all the questions if time permits. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the stars of today's webinar, our distinguished expert speakers who will join in today's forum. First of all, at the top of my screen, let me introduce Professor Li Yuxiao. Professor Li is the Vice President of the Chinese Academy of Cyberspace Studies and Secretary General of the Cybersecurity Association of China. And to his right would be from the Korea University, that's Professor Gabriel Kim Seongju. Professor Kim is Head of Department of the Cyber Defense of Korea University and a member of the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. We also have Mr. Craig Jones, Interpol's Cybercrime Director. With over 27 years of law enforcement and experience, Director Jones is an expert, I promise you, in the area of cyber and digital crime investigations and capabilities development. We're going to talk a little bit not just about capacity, but also capabilities. I'm going to tap on him a lot for that. And of course, finally, Mr. Chris Connell, who is our Managing Director for Asia Pacific at Kaspersky. Thank you to each of you for joining us today. To all the audience, I thought I should inform that just very shortly before the start of this event, we've received news that Mr. Eugene Kaspersky will not be able to join us today, as he's just been called to a very urgent matter which requires his personal attention. So he sends his regrets and is, however, confident we will have an equally fruitful and successful forum discussion today. So without further ado, may I please invite Chris to perhaps say a few words to open up the session. Over to you, Chris.
Well, thank you, Jean, and likewise, welcome to everybody on behalf of Kaspersky to our third online policy forum. It's a pleasure to be here, even though I have some very big shoes to fill with regards to Eugene's. I'm pretty sure that you'll find today's session as good as it normally would be. So looking forward to discussing these points with the panel today. I mean, cyber capacity building, I mean, a question that gets thrown at us quite often is, what are the real needs and goals of countries in cyber capacity building, education and awareness? Do they differ from country to country? Well, I guess, first of all, yes, they are different. Each country is different in terms of budgets, cybersecurity policies, priorities, and many, many more. Now, however, do not forget that we live in an age of widespread rapid digitalization, and as a result, cyber attack services have grown exponentially, particularly in sectors that have been made critical amidst the pandemic, really. And with that, we know for a fact that a competent cybersecurity workforce and secure foundational technology in our homes and our workplaces, critical infrastructures, government services, well, they're instrumental in tackling the growing numbers of cyber attacks that we're seeing day by day. And therein kind of lies a gap, but also an opportunity for us all to take action. I mean, cyber capacity building is key, really, to developing a competent cybersecurity workforce and able to ensure that a cyber resilient digital transformation. And again, it's kind of the responsibility of all governments and all businesses to provide cyber training and education. I mean, at Kaspersky, for example, we have a rich history of delivering cyber capacity building programs. And we do this alongside our valued partners, our clients, and the wider community in order to shape a secure digital future for all of us. Now, security is security of all, really. I mean, and given our interdependence in the online space, our collective security depends on each of us, really, and success, I mean, therefore, is the sum of our joint efforts, working together, working as teams. Now, with this spirit, Kaspersky developed what's known as our cyber capacity building program, which is there to train governments, businesses, schools, in order to protect themselves against like ICT supply chain attacks. Now, don't forget, every part of the ICT supply chain, whether it be big or whether it be small, can be a target for attack, with significant implications on the entire supply chain, really. So there we are. That's also like inviting small businesses, as well as, like I said already, the education departments and the government departments, and we're inviting these to learn and develop cyber resilience through all of our programs. But last on that point is, like, we don't just stop there. Cyber criminals know no borders. Okay. Likewise, it is in our interest to cooperate and I guess build cyber capacity across all of these borders. So we have a higher chance, I guess, really in total there of winning the fight together. Now, one last point I'd like to make around the whole cyber capacity piece is just really to give everybody what we would class as like the 10 major takeaway points when it comes to cyber capacity building. Now we can obviously share these with people, and I'm not sure whether everybody will remember these, but cyber capacity building, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It takes time to develop all of these networks, these teams, and everybody in order to make sure you're protected as well as you can. Cyber capacity building needs a common language so that everybody understands it and can work together and make it happen. Cyber capacity building, it's not only about security, it impacts social and economic development worldwide too. Cyber capacity building challenges are not the same for everybody. Everybody has a different challenge every single day. One size does not fit all, but it fits most, and everybody's doing all they can to try and make sure that we adapt as everything changes on a day-by-day basis. Cyber capacity building priorities are not the same for everyone. Everybody has a different priority depending on their needs as either an individual or as a business or a government. Cyber capacity building requires international coordination, so it isn't something that can just start and begin in one specific country. It takes lots of coordination across the globe in order for it to work. Cyber capacity building requires stakeholders' cooperation. We need the leaders of the world. We need the leaders of the countries, the governments, the businesses to all cooperate together in order to make it a priority. Cyber capacity building is not a priority for everyone, as I just said there, but we need to make sure that it does start to become one. And last but by no means least, it is time to move from needs to actually delivering on this, because if we don't, and the way the world's changing, then there is going to be more and more risk as we move forward. So I hope that kind of gives you an intake, Jeannie, and for our panels and for our audience today with regards to my thoughts and Kaspersky's thoughts around the whole cyber capacity building and the programme. And on that note, I hope that kick-started the event today with a bit of knowledge that we can now take forward, Jeannie.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for that. Thank you. Some themes to from what was covered in your opening remarks. I'm hearing cooperations, partnerships, putting into action, implementation on some of these plans. I'm sure we will, but of course I'm sure we'll be discussing all that, but really much depends also on what the floor asks later, and I hope we get questions along those lines as well. But for now, as a precursor to the panel discussion, where I will then start calling our experts to give their take as well, I just want to draw everyone's attention to the screen, because we're going to run just one poll question for now. If you were to look at your screen, I will need your help, everyone in the audience, to go to www.menti.com, MENTI.com, and to key in the code 6011 1851. 6011 1851. My colleagues would have left a message with a link to access the poll for all our audience. And the question, of course, would be, how would you, irrespective of your country of origin, how would you rate your countries, of course, without having the ability to disclose your country of origin, but how would you rate your country's current level of cyber capacity preparedness on a scale of 1 to 10? Well, actually on a scale of 0 to 10. So let's just give our audience some time to put in their answers to the poll, and we should see the screen jump. Wow, pretty high, 6.3. And of course, out of the attendees that we have today, we have seen the registration list, very long one. People come from everywhere in Asia Pacific, and some of them outside of Asia Pacific even, right? So, all right, maybe I think while people continue to maybe key in their responses, but I'm seeing it hovering around 6.3 over 10. I'm not sure. I'm probably going to call on Professor Kim first. Oh, now it's dropped to 5. I should stop talking, maybe. It could be an instance where I say, oh, it's pretty high, and then people start dropping. Okay, Professor Kim, maybe I'm just going to ask you, because recently, and we've seen this in your quote as well, you have said, that as the importance of cybersecurity spreads across all areas, security experts are forced to have more in-depth domain knowledge than ever before. And you have suggested that perhaps one thing to look into is to have a more effective workforce development program to train security experts specialized in each industrial sector. I'm going to call on you to maybe elaborate on that a little bit, and also ask you, based on what you're seeing in this poll question, we're seeing 5.7 over 10 in terms of people's response to their assessment of their country's current level of cyber capacity preparedness. Just want to ask, are you surprised by the results of this poll, and maybe to give your response to workforce development program in training security experts in industrial sectors? Professor Kim.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think that this score is a little bit high than I think. and why don't you reveal that score for each country? What was that?
Oh wow, that's a breakdown. Yeah. This is a bell curve, like, you know, my university grading system, a bell curve. Yeah, it's about 5.6 now, more or less. Yeah. Surprised you?
Yeah, but as I said before, a little bit surprised. And then in this time, I want to talk about the human resource development for about the cybersecurity. So can I use some my materials?
Of course, of course. Feel free to share screen. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, we see your slides. Thank you.
Yes. Can you see this? Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, and first of all, thanks for inviting me to this honorable panel sessions. And I'm Seung Kim from Korea University, and I want to talk about the human resource development for greater cyber resilience. Our government makes Department of Cyber Defense program in our Korea universities. Our Department of Cyber Defense is established in 10 years ago, which program is inspired by the Israel's Talpiot program. Here, Talpiot means best of the best. In every year, we recruit 30 students. All of them has a full scholarship, and they have obligations to do a military jobs for 7 years. After their graduations, they are to be commissioned as a second lieutenant and must serve in the military sectors. We accept top 1.4 students in the National College entrance examinations. And besides this, we have several public sectors and also private sectors education program like this. Among these, the most famous one is KITRI's BOB programs. These BOB programs is very famous for its learning, its strong peer-to-peer mentoring programs. But we still have problems to solve. As we enter the fourth revolution era, cybersecurity is becoming more important than ever. For example, in European unions, they made some regulations on automotive cybersecurities. According to that regulations, all of the companies should receive some certifications from EU about that prove their vehicles is safe from cyber attacks. And also on April 11th, 2019, IATA held some aviation cybersecurity roundtables. Through this, they concluded that it was necessary to cultivate a new generation of individuals who is able to support aviation cybersecurity challenges. And also, U.S. Department of Defense developed various policies and programs to improve their weapon systems against cybersecurity. But as you see before, as the importance of cybersecurity spread across all areas, security experts are forced to have more in-depth domain knowledge than ever before. So it's time for us to think about more effective workforce development programs to train these security experts specialized in each industrial sectors. Yes, then how can we solve these problems? I think that most important thing is partnerships. As our world becomes more and more hyper-connected societies, we need more and more practical talents with the combination of theory and practice. But it is very difficult for universities to cultivate these practical talents because universities don't have any real data generated in the real world. So in these situations is particularly serious in the fields of the automobiles and aircraft and weapon systems and so on. All of these areas requires very in-depth domain knowledges. Therefore, universities should aim to educate students who have solid basic skills so that they can quickly acquire practical knowledge taught in the company after joining that companies. And also, government or the companies should try to make some kind of the research platform, like the platform shown in Cyber Grand Challenge of the US. So if the government and the company and the university co-work to make some practical talent students, then we can I think that we can deal with many cybersecurity problems in these areas. Yes, yeah. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kim. I am starting to again see some of the key themes like public-private partnerships coming up as well, and of course also the role of universities and in the role of universities in this entire process. Yeah, I would like to now call on perhaps Professor Li Yuxiao, to share with us some perspective from China's context. In particular, what are the most pressing needs in terms of capacity building, awareness and education, and how has China strengthened its cyber capacity building? And as you share China's experience, Professor Li, could you also maybe let us know your thoughts, if any, about how some of these lessons are applicable to the region as a whole, Asia Pacific, and some of your key thinking? Over to you, please, Professor Li.
Okay, thank you, Ginny. And thank you, Eugene Kaspersky. Thank you, Professor Kim, other dear guest. Good morning, and I'm not sure you can hear me.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's a good afternoon or good morning also. And I'm Secretary General of Cybersecurity Association of China. And thank you for having me here. I'm glad to attend this forum. And concerning of the theme of this forum, I think this is very interesting. I'm going to share my personal experience and insight into the industry, which hopefully inspired you so how. And in fact, I'm very interested about this topic because I think when we come here, we just talk about how to improve we can discussing how the APAC nations can improve our cybersecurity and the capacity. But if, in fact, if the cyber attacks are only from Asian nations, then I think maybe we will be much safer. If APAC nations are only obsessed with making compliance with each other, I don't think we will never be able to improve our cybersecurity. So in these recent years, the Asia and the Pacific region has secured a certain progress in promoting cybersecurity building and cyberspace governance. However, every country and region different demands for cyber security capacity and vary from each other in legislation and regulation enactment. There is still a long way to go in improving cybersecurity resilience and cyberspace governance. So for the first topic, Jenny just talked about, I think that especially in China, our Central Party Committee led by the President Xi Jinping has attached great importance to the development of cyberspace and the information sectors, and has made a series of major discussion and plan for cybersecurity, talent development, and the critical information infrastructure security act. This years has witnessed some progress in building China's strength in cyber and information sectors, which increasingly enhance the cybersecurity capability and the blossoming development of a digital economy. China has created a path of cyber capacity building with the China characteristics, making it a contribution to global internet development. Under the outline of the 5-year plan from this year for the national economic and social development and Vision 2035 of the People's Republic of China, which will reviewed and approved by the 5th Plan Session of 18th Communist Party of CAC, and specified that the cybersecurity guarantees system and the cyber capacity building should be enhanced in all respects and should be incorporated into the system of national security and the scope of the cyber capacity building, which demonstrates the importance of cybersecurity in national security. It can seem that the China's Vision 2035 has underlined the improvement of institutional building and capacity building. With the systematical mindset, the approach is target-driven and program-oriented, which help us tackle the key difficult program facing us at the moment. In addition, the release and enactment of cybersecurity laws, cybersecurity classifies protection system, and personal information protection law, and also data security law, critical information infrastructure security protection regulation, and other major laws, regulations, and policies is of vital importance for our country to protecting cyberspace security and implementing the Internet Power strategy. The both cyber capacity building, we have focused on meeting the following need: the need to build and improve the cyber infrastructure, the need to prevent and address cybersecurity risk and challenges, and need to jointly build a community with a shared future in cyberspace, and the need to accelerate the development of education and training system for cyber capacity building personnel. And I think that there's 4 ideas. First, we need to build and improve the cyber infrastructure. Since the 21st century, the information technology revolution prevented by the internet has rapidly reached the whole world, promoting digital transformation and realize liberation and the network development of productivity. Critical information infrastructure security protection has become an important guarantee for promoting digital economic development. At present, the world is experiencing unprecedented changes and more complex international environment and the increasing uncertainty and instability. Critical information infrastructure security matters much to national cybersecurity and data security, increasingly become a core and key element to national cybersecurity compatibility. So the critical information infrastructure security protection religions released by the State Council has taken efforts on this month, and is a special administrative regulation for critical information infrastructure security protection and laying on the legislative foundation and the protection of critical information infrastructure security of China. And secondly, we need to be aware of cybersecurity challenges brought about by and focus on improving the capacity of security, defense, and emergency response. Facing global challenges of cybersecurity, we need to further improve the security, protection, and capacity. This means that we not only need to have the capacity to effective response, but also need to have the capacity to effective prevention. Only in this way we can improve, prevent, and tackle cyber threats and risks, and better response to changes and challenges in cyberspace. The common goals of the cybersecurity industry is not to avoid failing, but to raise up after failing. This is what we are resilience. Our ultimate goal is to fail less and rise up faster and become more resilient. And thirdly, I think that we need to set up long-term goals to jointly build a community with a shared future in cyberspace. In December 2015, President Xi Jinping pointed out that the cyberspace is a common activity space on mankind, and the future and the destiny of the cyberspace should be controlled by all countries and regions across the world. Countries and regions should strengthen communications, expand consensus, deepen cooperation, and jointly build a community with a shared future in cyberspace, according to the principle of inclusiveness specified China's international strategies of cooperation on cyberspace. It is recommended that the countries and the regions should proactively promote bilateral, regional, and international cooperation, especially increase funding and technology support for developing countries to enhance their cyber capacity, seize the digital opportunity, and close the digital divide. And fourthly, not the last, but we need to accelerate the development of the cyber capacity building, personal education, and the training system. Nowadays, there's still a big gap in the global demands for the cybersecurity professional. The Asia-Pacific region is most affected by the situation. To improve the state's core is need to accelerate the development of the cybersecurity personal education and training system. We should set up efforts and
I think we lost Professor Lee. The sound is off. Hello. Okay. I think am I the only one? No, can't hear Professor Lee. Yeah. Okay. Professor Lee, are you with us still? Yeah. I think some connection problems over there. Maybe in the interest of time, I will come back. I will come back to Professor Lee, but really what I've heard so far is his sharing of experience from China in terms of, so I'm starting to see some things, some key phrases that are being used to describe what goes into the mix, right, for success factors. So it includes like critical information infrastructure, policy levers, awareness and education as well, and of course cooperation across countries and also public-private partnerships. So I just want to put a pause there, and maybe now I will turn to, while we try to fix the sound issue with Professor Lee, I would like to turn to Director Jones. Director Jones, sorry to have kept you waiting. I'm really very interested to hear from you. What are the challenges that you have been seeing from Interpol, from the global law enforcement perspective? If you've got insights to share, please.
Thanks very much, Jeannie, and also thanks to Kaspersky, one of our long-term private partners we've been working with for a number of years now, for having us on this event. I think we look at it through a number of different ways. First of all, we understand what's the role of law enforcement. The role of law enforcement is the protection of life and property and the prevention of crime. So certainly within this space, it's really important about how do we prevent crime. Historically, policing, we are used to work in that physical context. In my career, that's where I started, walking the streets. I'm now in a whole different environment. I would never imagined this nearly 30 years ago, that I would be in such a role, having such a wide remit of 194 countries, looking at it through all of their needs and trying to deal with it. It's almost too big an issue. So we then focus it back onto what's the problem set that we have here. Maybe I'll just talk about the difference that I see between capacity and capability, because there's a terminology and a language piece here as well. Law enforcement need capabilities, and they need those capabilities to fight crime. And you identify the capabilities that you need, and the capabilities are there to go after the bad, stop them doing bad things to people, and prevent their actions, and disrupt and take them to the court process. So we need different capabilities. The capacity side of that is how much of that do we need? So in the higher crime types, you may need some very, very specialist capabilities, but you may not need a lot of them. And then on the prevention side, you need a lot more capacity. And this then comes back to, and it's interesting, Professor Kim was talking about the university side of it. So the university's been involved, but as we know, it starts way before that. I've come from a background where, I didn't have a mobile phone from the age of 5. Our children, our families, everybody now is connected, and we're users. Basically, we are users of these devices. And quite often, we don't know what we've got in our hand, what we're connected to, what's connected to us. So there's an understanding and an education piece in here. And then it's like anything, when someone's taught to drive a car, you know that you shouldn't drive at certain speeds in certain areas because you might crash. You might not get to places. We haven't transferred this across yet into the online space, into that cyberspace. Now, if we look in the Asia-Pacific region, we've got about 2.3 billion internet users. That's phenomenal. People connected like that. That's almost half of the global internet usage. And that's going to increase. And by increasing on that side, we have to look at the cybersecurity, for crime prevention. How do we protect those communities online? How do we keep them safe? And the law enforcement aspect of this is, what's our response? What's the capabilities and capacity that we need? So this is quite crucial because we're looking at this, as I said, through different countries, through different regions, and globally as well. So challenges, definition of cybercrime. I didn't prosecute anybody for a cybercrime in the UK when I was working there operationally. I prosecuted them for Computer Misuse Act offence, fraud offence. We've got our legislation is outdated still. We're only able to work in a national construct. It's very difficult still for us now to work cross borders, cross jurisdictional. Interpol's really lucky. I only now work in the crime area, so my life's a lot simpler. I only look at cyber criminals. Our Article 3 prohibits us from dealing with anything that's got a political or military nature. And listening to some of the other comments, that's sort of a previous world maybe that I was looked at. But on the crime side of this, who are the criminals? Who are those organised crime networks? How do we target and disrupt those crime networks? Do we go after the chief financial officer, the chief technical officer, because they're businesses now? How do we use our policing capabilities? How do we train the police to go after and disrupt that? But that's not just our job. It's a whole system approach. So when we look at the partnerships, whether we're partnering with private partners such as Kaspersky, whether we're partnering with other law enforcement, we've all got different roles to play. We have a technology aspect. How safe is that technology? You know, certain vehicles might have limiters for their speed. You know, do we have those built in yet into the technology? Is it by default? Is it by design? But as users, we want it to be quick and as easy as possible. So then we have to put that balance in there. Also for policing, it's around the numbers. So the reporting of crime and cybercrime, it's very difficult for us to get that on a national, regional and global. And certainly when I put in for a business case, I have to have it based with evidence on there. I have to have some facts and some figures. And we're slowly now starting to get some of those facts and figures, certainly in ransomware at the moment, business email compromise, those figures are coming out and we're seeing the harm that it's causing businesses and communities. The recent Contiware ransom attack in Ireland, yes, virtually the whole system was taken out. But what we then saw was the real impact in those local doctors' surgeries where people didn't have their outpatients appointments, couldn't go and receive their chemotherapy treatment, couldn't receive that medical attention that they needed. Now, when we see some real world impacts, that's quite often then when the governments and communities say, hang on, why is this happening to us? Why is this impacting on us? What are police doing about it? What's the government's doing about it? So then we can have a much more informed discussion and debate in this. But my final point is prioritisation. Quite often it's not a priority for police because, you know, someone isn't bleeding, someone isn't injured, you know, it's a report, someone's lost some money, it's filed away, no further action because it's too difficult. So part of our global programme is to address that, looking to aggregate those data sets, looking to give that fuller, richer picture to countries and say, actually, the infrastructure is hosted in your country, the threat actors in your country and the victims are in your country. Let's get all of us together here now, and Interpol can be that neutral interlocutor to carry out and coordinate and support those investigations that for geopolitical reasons may not be able to happen. And then, of course, you've got the regional part to this as well. And maybe we have time, we'll talk about some of the work we're doing in the Asian region for joint operations against cybercrime. But that's where we're now getting the investment from countries from one country into another region and the regions behind that. So I think that's enough from me, and I'll let us get back to this fascinating conversation. Thank you, Jeannie.
Thank you, Director Jones. I definitely will want to ask you some questions about the ACCGP, but we'll come back to that later on for sure. For now, I think we're waiting for Professor Lee to come back and join us, but I'll turn to Chris next, because I've got a question here. As a global company, Kaspersky, right? So, and also, Chris, you don't just take an APAC role, you also have a global role, wearing your other hat. So as a global company, speaking on behalf of Kaspersky, you've got your sights set on countries all over the globe, literally. Do you feel, based on your assessment of Europe, you know, Asia Pacific, comparing the regions, do you feel the ingredients for success differs from region to region, or is there somewhat a common set of success factors? Your views, please, Chris.
Great comments there as well, Director Jones, especially around the points around how many devices are actually connected these days. You know, I think we've done a presentation recently that that showed how many devices are actually connected globally, and it's just growing and growing and growing and growing. I think if memory serves me correctly, it was something like 60 billion devices connected globally. So well, I look at that myself, I've probably got 6 myself, right? So yeah, so it's good to hear them points from you. But back to your point, Jeannie, around what do I see globally? Honestly, it varies region by region, country by country. We see, I mean, the way I kind of look at it at the moment, I think we've already touched on, like, I've said this earlier on in my things, every country is different, right? Every country has a different budget. Every country has a different way, you know, of how many people can connect to the digital world these days. And what we're seeing is, with all respect, we're seeing, let's call it the more westernized countries advancing quicker than we are seeing other countries at the moment across the globe. The uptake in prioritization of cybersecurity, we are seeing it growing more exponentially in the Western Europe kind of countries and Middle East kind of countries, but not to say not in Asia too. There are some countries in the Asia Pacific region where we're also seeing similar trends with regards to it becoming more and more of a priority. But back to the point that I think Dr. Jones, you touched on again earlier, you know, it's not being treated as a priority as much as it should be, though. You know, it's still being ranked. I would say, you know, some countries out of the top 3, but it needs to be as a priority within the top 3. And that's not only with governments, that's with businesses, but that's also with consumers as well. At the end of the day, you know, the consumer needs to make sure that they're protecting themselves in this new world that we find ourselves in as well. But back to our points already, you know, around the whole programs, etc., cyber capacity. That's where we have to step in, like as a company like Kaspersky, alongside our partnerships with governments and businesses and partners alike, to continue that education and continue to make it become that priority, which seems to be the word that we keep kind of mentioning quite a bit on this forum today. You know, priority, education. So yeah, so I hope that kind of answers you. I mean, like I say, it's still nowhere near where it needs to be. But it's definitely going in the right direction, and we will continue to fight that good fight, right?
Yes, I like that. Fight the good fight. Thanks for Chris. Thanks for those remarks, Chris. Okay. Can I just check if Professor Lee is back? I saw him join us momentarily. Professor Lee. Li Yuanjia. Professor Lee, I think I see you. Yes, and I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Just now I restart my computer. Yeah.
I just thought maybe you want to finish up your comments, and also can I ask you one question? We're talking about public-private partnerships. Do you see difficulties in public-private partnerships, and how can businesses, private sector, do better at supporting country-level efforts? Is there an observable gap in expectations, and how can we partner better together between the public and private sector? So maybe if I can get your views on that, Professor Lee.
I think that this is a really interesting and valuable question, and capacity building in cyberspace, I think, must follow a multi-level governance process and covering not only vertical training, but also hiring efforts across the government department and the private sector and cyber society, and also include about the government, the public, and the private sector. I think that there are some important sectors or factors to build up the cooperations to improve the capacity. First is sharing, to share the demands, to share the different kind of demands. That's a different level from the government and from the enterprises and from the public. That's for the cybersecurity capacity building demands is quite different. And if they just think about themselves for their performance or for their capacity is not enough. They must share information with others. And second is the trust. For the capacity building, it's need for the different sector, different tutors. They must cooperate together, and they must set up the trust between each other. And for the third one is that for the capacity building and for the corporation must enlarge the market. They must realize what's the value of the cyber security, some technical and product and service value. Till now, from our cybersecurity industry, in fact, not only in China, but also in other countries, especially in Asia, I mean that each country, the cybersecurity industry is not very large. It can support the technical creatively innovation. It's very difficult to face a lot of seize demands and risks. And it means that we must set up a very effective platform to support the technical innovation. This need that we must show our value, our cybersecurity's value to the public, not only from the private, but also from the public, from the governance, from the government. They all need to show the security's value. It's not only for the traditional informationization from the traditional industry's value, but also for the cybersecurity, for the cyberspace. It means that we must build a more powerful, more useful, and more constant growth market. So without these three factors, I don't think that if we just want to set up cooperation, not only for the public or private, it's not enough. So I mean that the sharing, trust, and market. This is very important. But also, I know that each one here that you have a very valuable ideas. I think that we can share and discuss about it. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Thank you very much. And also, actually, and I haven't forgotten this, I had in my mind to come back to this topic because I was going to harass Director Jones about the ACCDP. And also I should mention, at the country level also, of course, there are some countries like China, Korea, who have sort of also led the way in terms of cross-border cooperation. Like in Korea, there's a global cybersecurity capability assessment tool for countries to sort of help to understand the current state of cybersecurity and also to foster global cooperation. And in China, of course, there's also the international strategy of cooperation on cyberspace. So I think there are these efforts at national levels that are happening. And at the Interpol, I am aware and I have read with interest Interpol's ASEAN Cyber Capacity Development Project. So I'm just going to perhaps get Director Jones to maybe share more about that.
Yeah, of course, Julie, no problem. So ACCDP, as it's kindly referred to, we always like a good acronym within policing. That came about in 2016, and this is where there was investment, but also there was an opportunity. Within the region, Singapore is the digital shepherd, and they looked at how they could support the countries in the region. And one of these was around the cyber, what was available for the police, law enforcement agencies in the countries. So the first thing they looked at was, a bit of a needs assessment. Where were they? Not quite the maturity model that was carried out, but it identified some capability and capacity gaps. So that was the first part. It then looked at how could they start filling those, and they did them through people, processes and technology. On the people side, they looked to identify how many law enforcement officials were trained, where were those training gaps, how could they fill those training gaps, and over a phase of about 2 years, they carried out numerous training exercises, looking at all aspects of criminal investigation to cyber, digital forensics, and this included bringing together a number of different experts from around the world into the region. They also carried out a number of national cyber reviews. So this is where Interpol teams went into countries and they carried out cyber reviews of the law enforcement, and they're looking at the specialist needs and training. That then moved into a second phase, which was building up also on the feedback from the first phase. So we looked at this continuous cycle. But the important factor that was added on then was the operational element to this. So quite often trainings are done. We like a good training course, we get a nice certificate, we get a coffee at the end and a pat on the back and well done. But how do we then turn that into using that in our day-to-day processes? So we added an operational side into that, and we set up the ASEAN Joint Operational Desk here in Singapore. Now, that's been really successful because we then carried out operations with those countries, and it's either identifying the criminal actors that are operating in those countries, infrastructure that's in those countries, or vulnerabilities. And we've worked not just with law enforcement, we've worked with our private partners, but also the certs, so the national certs. Now that model's now been rolled out globally. So we're taking that response into Africa, for example. We've just set up our Africa Joint Operations Against Cybercrime in Africa, and we're going to have the intel staff and based here looking at the threats. We know there's threats emanating from Africa, and we've been working with our private partners, attributing to those actors carrying out arrests. We're going to continue that in other regions as well, so slowly building that model. But you spent on the time, you mentioned at the time when this first started, 2016. It's taken us 5 years to get this far. It's too slow. We're not quick enough. We're not as agile as we should be. And a lot of this comes back to coming to my earlier points about the prioritization. It's about drawing the different partners together, using and building that trust model, but also working at the correct levels with your capabilities. So where is it best to aggregate those data sets? Is it best to aggregate them nationally? Yes, potentially in some crime areas, but actually we need the global picture, and law enforcement doesn't hold that global picture. So that's why, again, working with threat intelligence companies and vendors, we're able to aggregate that data together. So that then helps us build into those regional programs as well, and then also supporting those countries where they may not have those capabilities that are required and they have the threat actors there. So we can then work with them or marry them together with another country that does have those capabilities. But coming back to a time aspect on this, this takes time. And unfortunately, that's one of the enemies that we have. The cyber criminals, they adapt very quickly. They don't necessarily have the legislation. They can start one action, one activity, stop it. They don't have a program board or a project board that they report to. Effectively, their main aim is just to make money. But again, this is what we're all working towards, and that's what our role is to reduce that global impact of cybercrime.
Taking its time, but nevertheless meaningful, getting there slowly. We just have to press on. Very good work. Thank you very much. We need to clone Director Jones perhaps, and then get cracking a little bit more and work together more as well. I'm going to turn my eyes to Professor Kim. Professor Kim, I want to ask you this next question. How does the current situation in cyberspace impact global cyber capacity building? So what are the challenges or opportunities for us in terms of global cyber capacity building? I'm sure there's a lot we can do, but I know there are lots of challenges, but I'm sure there are also opportunities. Are you hopeful about the future? So I just thought I want to ask you that next question. Professor Kim.
Yeah, thank you. Your question is a very big one, I think so. So
you can take a couple of minutes.
Yeah, yes. But in this conference and also nowadays, we talk a lot about the partnerships, but in the reality is that it is not so easy. I think the beginning of the partnership begins with the information sharing or the data gatherings. And these information sharing or the data gathering are based on mutual trust between each countries and between each organizations and so on. As I said in my presentations, in order to cultivate talented people with practical skills, universities needs the actual data to be used in educations. But it is not an easy decision for the companies and the government to share the actual field data with schools for educations. Also, in order to respond supply chain attacks, information sharing between countries and information sharing between the public sectors and private sectors is very important. But this is also not an easy one, because nowadays information becomes property. Nowadays, zero-day vulnerabilities becomes money. So I think that when we discuss partnerships, we need to discuss the effective information sharing systems more seriously. And also we need to talk about the effective ways to establish mutual trust. I think so.
Yeah, actually, you're right. And I'm actually seeing some of these issues play out in my day-to-day work as well, actually. So what you're saying is very relevant, very real, and I'm seeing it happening as well. But I think there's always still hope.
I think that this kind of forum is a very effective way to establish mutual trust.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. That stamp of approval, the endorsement. Thank you very much. And I promised the audience I didn't tell him to say that. Yeah. All right. So I have got a question from a member of the media. I thought I should direct this. I think some coming from law enforcement experience and all that. I think Director Jones would be most well placed to answer this question. The question is from News Bites from the Philippines. What do you see? Director Jones, what do you see as the top concern for Asian countries when it comes to cybersecurity? Is it malware, data theft, or something else? Yeah. Director Jones.
So I think I would point you first of all to our website and our Asian threat assessment that was issued in January 2021 with the help of the countries in the region and also our private partners. What we're seeing, I think, is the threats aren't not really changing. The TTPs that the crime actors are using are sort of saying the same. They're adapting the technology. They're playing on the vulnerabilities. So we saw during COVID-19 that the increase there of the online frauds. So that was very, very big in this region. We saw a huge growth in that area. It started off with the personal protective equipment, paying for it, and then it was never delivered. We then moved into the vaccine side of things as well. So what we see is a cycle in different regions where vulnerabilities are exploited by the cyber criminals. At the moment, and I think we were talking earlier about the different capabilities and capacities in different countries, and the Western may be a bit more advanced than other regions, but actually that's a vulnerability because they have more reliance then on digital technology. And we're seeing that move across the different regions now as well. So ransomware at the moment, that is a really, really big topic in the Western English speaking side at the moment, but that's now moving into this region. It's slowly moving into Africa as well. So business email compromise is another one. We've seen that coming through from the West. It's now in some of these regions as well. But coming back, it's those online scams we're seeing a lot of, the romance scams. Again, it's on the vulnerability side of this as well. And it's the security aspect, so turning that around and saying, well, how do you prevent that? It comes back like any crime prevention. If something looks too good to be true, it normally is. And just because it's on your screen and it looks fantastic, but you then get the urgency, you have to buy this now, you have to invest in this virtual currency, you have to do this. Again, we get a little bit worried and we do that. Then you read about this time and time again, but The cyber criminals can do thousands of attacks in one go, and they only need to be successful 1, 2, 3 or 4 times, and they've made their money effectively. So long as we have the human element to this, where we are all fallible at times, and looking then at the technology element of this to protect us, and I think this is where we'll see the developments with AI and cybersecurity as well coming through over the coming years effectively. It's a very interesting area to be in. It's also potentially, some people say, a very scary space to be in, but guess what? If you don't have your computer turned on, you're unlikely to be a victim of a scam. And I'm not saying people shouldn't use computers, far from it. But again, just thinking about our usage and how we go about it is quite important for all of us.
Yeah, such golden words of wisdom. If it's too good to be true, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
But before everyone starts shutting down computers to avoid getting we've had very good discussions coming from all our speakers today. But I'm very mindful of time, and we're running into the last 3 minutes. So I'm gonna do a lightning round of quick responses as sort of a concluding segment by our panel. I'll call on each of you to give me your quick response to just one question, the same question for all of you. So coming back to the idea of our collective efforts against cybercrime, fighting together to create a safer cyberspace, who do you think is leading the race now? Us, the good guys, or them, the bad guys, cyber criminals? So who's leading the race? Director Jones, perhaps you first, and then I'll call on Professor Kim, Professor Lee, and then I'll end with Chris. All right?
Wow, that's a loaded question, isn't it now? So I would defer people to statistics. What do the statistics say around cybercrime? And depending on which organisation you speak to, you see a growth. So you could argue whether it's the cyber criminals that are winning, or whether it's us being more vulnerable effectively within that space and giving more opportunities. I wouldn't say at the moment law enforcement is working very hard and collectively, but where we are winning is in our public-private partnerships. So coming back to the professor's point about sharing data and trust, definitely see within our Gateway initiative now, we are sharing data, we are sharing information. We've got to now turn that into actionable intelligence that law enforcement can work on, or we can prevent cybercrime more. And certainly my 2 years at Interpol, that's really exciting to see how that's developed, and that is continued to develop. So we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Professor Kim, maybe on to you. So who's leading the race? Good guys or bad guys?
Sorry, I think that all of us here and those who listen to this forum is a good guy.
I hope so.
And the other people is a bad guy. I think so. It's just a joke.
So who's leading? The good ones are leading, or are they playing, or are we playing catch up and the bad guys are leading? What do you think?
I think that I have no idea.
Okay, I won't put you on the spot. Maybe it's a tie. For you. Maybe I'll call on Professor Lee. So what is your response? Who is leading the race now? Good guys or bad guys? Oh, Professor Lee, you're on mute, actually. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay. I think that it not depends on the good guy or bad guy, but it's AI's development is quite influence or important for the cybersecurity maybe also. And in fact, first, for us, for the good guys, I think that we will lead in the future. But in fact, the AI is quite different, and we're not sure what's the development in the future. And also for our Asia, I think that it's very necessary to strengthen the protection of the critical information infrastructure. It's the base, because that all of us that we face a very widely internet application and the very weakly our cybersecurity capacity. So we should establish and improve the cybersecurity emergency response standard system. Especially, we don't have international or regional standard system right now, and we must set up about it. And I Professor King and Craig and also Professor Charis, I think that we have enough smart to set up our push all this standard and the rules and in our Asia area, because in the future more and more of our good guys realize that it's very important. The rules is very important. So I think that in the future, if the bad guy also realize that the rules is also important, we will face more difficulties. But I think that we have the chance till now. We must set up to discuss about how to make it more clear and more useful.
So that we can make sure that justice always prevails. And on to you, Chris.
Well, first of all, the panel have given some great answers there already, and kind of.
Okay, I'm not sure if you miss again.
Yeah, we can hear you. We could, yeah. Thank you.
I wouldn't say it's about winning. Okay, I would say, as we've already discussed, you know, things change. Things are changing daily, country by country, region by region. It's more about going back to I think the big words we've been using today. It's about collaboration, you know, partnerships, you know, it's about education, it's about adaptation, and if we continue to do them things and prioritize things the way we've discussed today, then I'm pretty confident that eventually the good guys will be the ones that are winning. But we have to collaborate. We have to, you know, build these programs and engage and work better with each other in order to be able to do that. And if we can continue to do that through partnerships like ours with Interpol as an example, you know, then we're definitely going in the right direction.
Thank you. So I think the key is to not count your eggs until they're hatched. So let's not talk about who's leading the race. But anyway, for today's online policy forum, we've discussed very many things in a very short hour. Cybersecurity skills gap, upskilling, prioritization, cybersecurity education and awareness, public-private partnerships, cross-border cooperation. We've also touched on a new theme which I didn't think, I wasn't expecting would come up, but I'm glad it did. And that's the concept that was introduced by Professor Lee in his remarks, one of his remarks earlier on, about the concept of trust. Interesting. We might talk about that for future online policy forum, but let's see. For those who would like to revisit today's discussion after this event, a recording will be made available to all who have registered for the forum. If there are any questions, please feel free to reach out. Please join me in thanking our panel today who have shared with us their valuable experience and insights. Thank you very much, Mr. Craig Jones, Director Jones, Professor Li Yuxiao, Professor Gabriel Kim Seong-ju, and of course, Mr. Chris Connell from Kaspersky. It's been a great pleasure moderating today's forum for all of you. My name is Jeannie Gan, Head of Public Affairs for Asia Pacific at Kaspersky. Signing off right now, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.